YouTube because it always says you're connected, and then it takes 10 seconds to connect, or just doesn't connect even if it tells you it is.
Yeah.
So refreshing, and we're in. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody. Because I don't know if you're watching this live, or as I call it, zombie mode, which is doesn't mean you're dead. That just means you're not watching it live. Just so you know, I don't want dead people here. So after that stupid joke, my public service announcement of the day. You see these people? It's a mask. See? Okay.
There is a message for you.
So, as I always say, and in no polite terms, where's your fucking mask? Let me repeat. Wear your fucking mask. The mask is not for you. The mask is meant to protect others from you. Although it protects you, that's not the main point. We wear the mask so our elders, our children, our best friends, our close ones, whatever you want to call it, are safe from us. You never know if you have the coronavirus, COVID-19. You can be an idiot and go around and say, I'm going to see my friend who I haven't seen in 6 months, 3 months, whatever. I'm going to hug him or her. And you can cause really bad chronic illnesses or even death. So please, wear your mask. Don't be an asshole. And after that, as I always say, if you think you're too special, too important, too egotistical to wear a mask and don't care about anybody else, please leave this channel now. I don't want you here. So after that, sorry about that, Peter. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine. All I can think of is if Donald Trump is watching, he's going to be right out the door.
Yeah. that nothing would make me happier. Well, maybe Boris Johnson. Anyway, how's things? How's things in your neck of the woods? Are things in your area of New York getting better, or just
well, yeah, things are getting better. I mean, the thing is that before we had the virus, I would pretty much stay at home all day and work and not go out, as opposed to now where I stay at home and work all day and not go out. So my life really hasn't changed all that much, aside from the fact that when I go for my bowling league on Wednesday now, everybody's wearing masks.
Okay.
Which is pretty much required. I mean, nobody comes in and tries to make some sort of political statement by proclaiming that they aren't wearing a mask for whatever idiotic reason. But yeah, life is pretty much going on the same. I was astounded to discover that that movie theaters nearby me have opened. I was very surprised about that. No announcement had been made. We had no clue that they had opened up. Of course, now I find myself wondering, okay, is this movie that's playing something that I'm willing to risk death to go see? So far, the answer is no. I mean, I really don't want to risk getting a disease in order to see the new Crudes movie, you know. So I'm just kind of waiting until something like Black Widow opens up that's really worth my time.
Yeah, here theaters open for after the end of the first wave, then they closed again. When the second wave came, and I had time to watch 2 movies. One, I had to because of my 6-year-old. She wanted to see ScoobyDoo, so I had to. So I made a deal with my wife. She went and watched Tenet, the Christopher Nolan one.
Yes,
I went with the kid, and then the next week I went to watch Tenet. So at least
for us, ScoobyDoo never even opened to the theaters. It opened on HBO Max.
Wow, directly?
Yes, directly. It was one of the first theatrical. It was one of the first film that was intended for theatrical release that they basically just threw up their hands and said screw it and opened it up on HBO Max.
Yeah, I guess that here we have like a 2-month, relaxing period, which caused the second wave, of course.
Yeah,
where we could go to the theater to watch some movies there. But I think Trolls was the one. Trolls 2 was the one that they released directly here in streaming services at the same time. So have you noticed, during this situation, during the pandemic, that you're overworking, or is the other way around, that you, especially in the first few months, you have problems, concentrating because of the situation?
No. I mean, as I said, my home life hasn't changed all that much. I mean, if anything, the only thing that's different is that my youngest daughter isn't going to school as much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it used to be that Monday through Friday she'd be off to school. Now she goes Monday and Tuesday, and then the rest of it is all, virtual on computers and such. So no, there's no more strain on me now than there was before. Indeed, there's probably less
Mm-hmm.
because there's fewer places for me to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, up until fairly recently, I couldn't go to the movies. Um, on occasion, we go out for lunch or something like that. Now that restaurants have largely opened up,
Mm-hmm.
but no, my life is again proceeding pretty much as it was before.
Do you miss conventions at all?
Very much so. I mean, first of all, I hate not being able to meet the fans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, writing itself is a very lonely occupation. You sit there in front of the screen. You don't talk to anybody else. You put your fabrications down on paper and you send it off to the editor. And ideally, the next thing you see of it is when the artist has been drawing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no in-person interaction, and now there's even less. I mean, periodically in the past, I would go into the city because I'd be having lunch with an editor or something. That's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's working out of their houses now.
Yeah.
So it's
And
very
most editors aren't even in New York, right?
yeah. So it's a very isolated existence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really miss being able to interact with the fans.
Yeah.
Also, it hurt me financially because I'm generally able to make some decent money
Mm-hmm.
at these conventions, either for appearance fees or material that I sell, that sort of thing. I don't charge for my autographs, although I do have a tip box so people can donate money if they wish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and all that income is gone, and that's kind of hurt. But
Mm-hmm.
I've been adjusting the best that I can.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss also the interaction with other pros? The opportunity to see the people that you
Oh,
see
sure,
once or twice a year and
absolutely.
have the chance to just talk shop for whatever amount of hours?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have plenty of friends in the professional industry who I don't get to see anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, every time Marvel would open a new movie, they would have a company screening,
Mm-hmm.
and I see all my professional fans there. I mean, the last Marvel movie I saw was Endgame,
Mm-hmm.
and sitting just one row over were Chris Claremont and Larry Lieber.
Mm-hmm.
Just some of the greats in the industry were just one freaking row over, and it's just you feel very isolated.
Mm-hmm. So that's another reason to be dying to watch Black Widow, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
That's what, March now?
Yes, I believe so. It's pretty much an entire year. It
Yeah.
was originally scheduled to come out in May, and I believe that I believe that the new release date is March.
Well, let's hope the vaccines come out. They're ready on time.
Well, they're claiming they are. I mean, let's hope.
Let's hope. Yeah. Why did of all the opportunities of you have as a writer, in other fields, mostly novels, theater, movies, whatever, whatever. What made you decide comics was your first love? What you wanted to do?
Well, I always loved comics. I mean, ever since I was a kid. My first exposure to comics was when my mother would bring me to the barber to get my hair cut, and he had a stack of Harvey comics there. So those were the first comics that I wrote. I discovered superhero comics as a result of the George Reeves Adventures of Superman TV series. Because if you remember, that show always ended with the announcer saying, Superman is based on the character appearing in Superman magazines. And I
Mhm.
said, there are magazines? Okay, well, that sounds cool. And that's what started getting me into superheroes. And I just love superheroes. I mean, superheroes to a very large degree are modern myths. They are
Mhm.
our equivalent of the legends of Thor and
Mhm.
Hercules and all those other mythic deity type characters.
Yeah.
And I've always been attracted to stories like that. I wrote my very first comic book when I was like 12 or 13 years old. I wrote it and I drew it, and I discovered that I really enjoyed writing it, but I hated the drawing part. I just didn't have the patience or the talent to be any kind of a comic book artist. And that's pretty much what drew me in. I mean, I didn't go through my life saying I want to be a comic book writer. I said I want to be a writer, which I am. I mean, yes, I've written over 1,000 comic books, but I've also written over 100 novels, and I've written for television, both live action and animated, and I've written for movies. So, I've been getting around.
So, and that takes me to what you just mentioned. To what do you think that makes the comics language unique, or what makes it different from any other languages for you as a writer?
Well, the way the story's told. I mean, it's a fascinating combination of the written word and visual. I mean, Neil Gaiman pointed out that when you have pictures by themselves, it's artwork and it's generally considered the province of the adult. When you have words by themselves, that's the novel, and that's considered the province of the adult. But for some reason, when you combine words and pictures, people seem to think, oh, that's for kids. And I've really never understood that. I think comic books can be for whatever age they are aimed at. They are an amazing, trans age. There's no such word as that, but a transgenerational method of communicating and telling stories. And you always have to be very aware that you're telling something that's visual. If you are writing a novel or a screenplay for that matter, and you want to have 3 pages of 2 people sitting in a room and talking, you can do that. As long as what they're saying is interesting, engaging, you'll carry the viewer through. In a comic book, if you're going to have people sitting for 3 pages in a room talking, you better have something interesting happen visually, or the reader's just going to be bored as hell.
Um, and what are its limitations?
The fact that it's so visual. The fact that, I mean, for instance, I wrote a story that ran in a DC book. It was actually only 17 pages. And the concept was that the Penguin had trapped Commissioner Gordon's wife in a death trap, which was going to be triggered at midnight. And they had captured the Penguin, but the Penguin wasn't saying where she was. And they have the bat signal going, and Batman's not responding to the bat signal. And it's at that point like something like 11:37 p.m. Gordon has about 22, and I said it in one of those interrogation rooms that you see in, TV series like CSI or whatever. And basically, Gordon has 22 minutes to break the Penguin. And of that 17 pages, like 15 pages of it was 2 guys in a room talking. That was it. And we had a hell of a time getting an artist for it, because they kept sending it to the artist, and artists were going, I have no idea how in the hell I'm going to draw this and have it be interesting. And it was written full script. I mean, I did break it down, but basically it was 15 pages of 2 guys in a room talking. And artist after artist passed on it. We finally got Michael Gilbert and P. Craig Russell, who I thought did a terrific job with it. But that was kind of an instruction for me as to, it doesn't matter how awesome the story I'm coming up with is, I have to be aware that somebody has to sit down and actually render this in such a way that it's going to be visually interesting.
Do you think that when you and an artist connect, really connect, like in big letters, capital letters,
Mhm.
that synergy is what really summarizes what a comic should be.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like saying if I write a screenplay and a really great director directs it and a really great actors are in it, will that be better than will that make it something, really fantastic? Well,
Hmm.
yes. I mean, there's no script that is so good that a bad director or bad actors can't screw it up.
Hmm.
Interestingly, when the story is successful, the artist generally gets the credit for it. If the story is a failure, generally the writer gets blamed, So, very rarely do I have a badly drawn story and people go, wow, this is a really badly drawn story. They go, wow, Peter David really screwed up. You know, I mean, I've literally had things where I had a really great artist, and in the very next issue, the different artist screwed it up. And I've read people going, "Oh, Peter David really seems to have lost a step between the two issues." No, I'm just as good now as I was in the previous issue, but the artist completely buggered it.
Hmm.
I mean, indeed, there have been times where I wasn't wild about the artist and I was going to be doing a particular story, and I wound up delaying it because I knew we were going to be getting a different artist, and I had a feeling that he would be able to do a better job with it.
Hmm. Now, it's also for you as a comics writer, of course, it's also adapting if you can, if you know the artist you're going to have, of course, because as we know, many times you don't know in advance who's going to be there. But
Yeah.
if you know, you can adapt as you did, as I, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I think you did with the Hulk during all time. It depends on the kind of artist you had. You
Yeah.
adapted in a second to their strengths, to what they could do better and make it fit to your narrative, right? So by the end, it became that synergy. As I always said, that third entity that is created because of that synergy.
Oh yes. I mean, if I'm working on an ongoing series with an artist, I generally try to get an idea of what the artist's strengths are. I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. When I was working with Chris Cross on Captain Marvel,
Hmm.
I was trying to analyze what Chris's strengths were. And his storytelling was okay, but wasn't great. Um, and I realized that the thing that he was really good at was having people look completely insane.
Yes.
I mean, it didn't matter what they were doing or who they were. Everyone looked a little bit out of their minds.
Hmm.
And so I thought to myself, you know what? I should just have Captain Marvel just go nuts because that's going to be right in Chris's wheelhouse. And so I came up with the idea of that if with great power comes great responsibility, with too much power comes too much responsibility.
Hmm.
And I had the notion of becoming cosmically aware drive Captain Marvel completely out of his mind.
Hmm.
And he went nuts. And Chris Cross just knocked it out of the park because I was playing to his strengths.
Hmm.
Interestingly, after Chris left the series, I was still doing the story with Captain Marvel being insane. But the fans didn't seem to like it as much. Well, of course not, because the subsequent artists didn't all make people look nuts
Hmm.
the way that Chris did. So the story wasn't working as well as it had been.
Hmm.
You know, and of course people said, well, Peter David seems to have lost track of no. You know, I just lost the artist who was helping sell it. I mean,
Hmm.
if you have the artist um, doing the job, then you're going to wind up looking good. If they don't do the job, you wind up looking bad. So it's really in my interest to try and cater to whatever the artist's strengths are.
Absolutely. And how important, because of the way your scripts are really filled with emotion and drama, moving from the tears to the laughs, etc., etc. How important for you is that the artist you work with is able to express those emotions not only in the faces but also in the body posturing, etc.
Well, it's very important. I mean, the artist is to a certain degree your director. He's
Mm-hmm.
got to get the job done visually. If he, and which is part of the reason that I write full script.
Mm-hmm.
I tell the artist absolutely everything he needs to know, from what the characters are thinking to how they're reacting to what they're saying, so that he can draw their facial expressions or body posture to be consistent with what I'm trying to have them say.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, has it happened to you that the more you work with said artist, whatever artist, comes a moment when your scripts are less tight because you know what to expect?
No, no, I generally tend to write very tightly. I mean, I still remember many years ago, I was going to have Iron Man show up in the Hulk. So I asked him to send me the script because it wasn't drawn yet. The script for the issue of Iron Man that was going to be coming out right before my issue of Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the story, and I couldn't believe it because the first 2 pages were a summary of what had happened in the previous issue or two.
Mm-hmm.
And then it said pages 3 to 18, big fight, knock yourself out. And that was all he wrote. And for pages 3 to 18, big fight, knock yourself out. Are you out of your freaking mind? How a character fights somebody is a reflection of their personality.
Mm-hmm.
Thor doesn't fight someone the same way that Captain America does. Captain America doesn't fight someone the same way that the Hulk does. All of their techniques and everything they're going to do develops from their character, which is the province of the writer. If you, as the writer, aren't describing how the fight progresses, you're not doing your job. I mean, I read that script and really understood for the first time why the image guys felt that writers didn't bring anything to the party, because if they were dealing with writers who were putting that into their plots, they really weren't doing the jobs that they were hired to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No worry about it. And it's also about the motivation, right? I mean, if your story doesn't reflect for the artist to read, I mean, not even for the final comic, the emotion the characters are feeling or what's going through their heads or why they do what they do. If you tell me, I'm not an artist, of course, but if you tell me 15 pages, fight, knock yourself out, I'm going to be all time thinking, why?
Yeah.
And if I don't know the why, I'm just going to do a generic thing because I don't know if he's
Don't know
angry.
why. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Motivation is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Very important. I mean, why the characters do things are what make them who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to be explicit to your artists as to why they're doing what they're doing. Now, you don't always have to be candid with the readers. You can have them do things and they're making excuses for why they're doing it. And it's not true. I mean, you try to avoid having someone say exactly what they're thinking, because in real life, people don't generally operate that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you say to someone, how are you feeling? Generally, they'll go, oh, I'm feeling fine. In the meantime, their marriage can be breaking up, or maybe their kids hate them, or maybe they're having such major money troubles that they don't know how to put food on the table. But they're not going to say that. They're going to say, oh, I'm doing fine,
Mm-hmm.
Except for Jews. If you ask us how we're doing, we'll tell you. Peter, how you doing? Well, my knee's been hurting me lately. I mean, we if you ask us how we're doing, we will always give you an honest answer. But that's pretty much a Jewish thing.
Mm-hmm. Also, for you, as when you're writing a script, I was going to
Yeah.
say plot. Sorry, in case full script. Remember that when
Yeah.
When you're writing a script, what's the first thing that you focus on a story? Is the structure or is it the emotion? What is the part that draws you to a story?
I just telling the story. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I don't think I mean, I guess structure because, I write page one, panel A,
Hmm.
and I put in the dialogue. So I guess setting it up is pretty much the most important thing because, a story does have to follow narrative rules. Um, I mean, you try to have each page end on sort of a cliffhanger to give people a reason to turn the page and see what happens next.
Hmm.
So I guess structure, but if you don't uh, maintain the emotions, you're going to lose the reader's interest.
Hmm. How important you think it is for comics? I think it's a really important part, but I want to know your opinion. How important you think it is to get the reader participation? And I'm talking about, pattern recognition is also something I always think is very important for comics.
Right.
And people ask me, what do I mean? You know what I mean. But for the guys here, we were cavemen. You heard a bush moving. You thought, oh, maybe there's an animal there. Let's run. He's going to kill me. And I
Sure.
think that's very important for comics. That part, I always say the example about you don't need to draw Batman. Just the shape of the cape is telling you who that is. And for
Hmm.
many, I think, how important it is for us as comic creators to let space for the reader to complete things.
Well, I mean, there are certain tropes that are standard in comic books, which, if you're a smart writer, you can make fun of it. Um, I mean, why is it that when heroes meet for the first time, they always fight? I
Yeah.
mean, what the hell? You know? So if you're going to have heroes, nowadays people are so accustomed to it that if you're going to have heroes meet for the first time, you either better have a damn good explanation as to why they're fighting,
Mhm.
or you can just you can make a joke about it. Shouldn't we be fighting? Nah, that's too expected. Um, I mean, they did that even in the Marvel movies. I
Yeah,
mean,
in the first Avengers movie, yeah.
yeah, yeah. In the first Avengers movie, the first thing they did was all fight,
Hmm.
and as recently as Infinity Wars, when the Avengers from Earth, when Tony Stark and Doctor Strange and Spider Man
Yeah, true.
run into the Guardians of the Galaxy, the first thing they do is try to beat each other up. What the hell? You know? Why do hero? I mean, but people expect certain tropes,
Hmm.
and sometimes it can get ridiculous. For instance, way back when I first wrote The Death of Jean DeWolf, I had Spider-Man find out that Jean DeWolf was dead, and I had him stand there and go, "She's dead." But I just saw her the other day. How can she be dead? I had him react the way that you or I would react to
Hmm.
discovering, wait, they're dead? When did this happen? What the hell? Um, and an editor told me that I had done that completely wrong. That Spider Man's reaction should have been that he should have ripped a lamppost out of the ground and started smashing cars while shouting, "I can't believe she's dead." And I'm going, you're telling me that the proper response upon finding out that someone is dead is to commit thousands of dollars of property damage? Are you out of your mind? There are to an edit. This is a freaking editor who felt that this was the way for Spider-Man to react, rather than in a normal stunned way, as people always do when they find out that someone they saw just the other day has passed away. How can they be dead? I just saw them.
Hmm.
As if death has any respect for something like that.
Hmm.
So it is very easy to fall prey to the cliches and tropes that people expect. And you always just have to try and think of a way around it,
Hmm.
of coming up with some other way of putting across what you want to do. You want to just try something different. I try never to have two heroes meet up and the first thing they do is fight when they meet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had Spider-Man meet Spider-Man 2099, and Spider-Man says like, "Should we be fighting?" And Spider-Man 2099 says, "Nah, everyone is expecting that. Screw it." And they don't fight. Why would they? They had no reason to.
But that's also, as you just said, using the tropes to your benefit, right?
Yes.
Acknowledging they're there and playing, as we said, with the reader participation. The reader also knows the trope is there. So you
Yeah.
can play with them and tell them, look, you're expecting that trope, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to tell you, I know, let's do something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you always want to try and surprise the reader. If you're not surprising the reader, you're not getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. How important is the page turn for you?
Well, very. I mean, you want to try and keep people involved in the story. If they really don't feel like there's any point to turning the page to finding what happens next, you're not getting the job done. I mean, I really learned the idea of page turning from reading, believe it or not, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever read any of the Tarzan books,
Yeah.
basically when he tells a story, he's actually telling two stories that run concurrent with each other, and each chapter ends with a cliffhanger. And then, so chapter 3, you're going to have Tarzan fighting some natives, and one of them has targeted Tarzan, and he's about to throw a spear at him. Then you turn the page, and the next chapter is Jane involved in some completely different situation. And it gets to the point where at the end of chapter 4, Jane is hanging off the side of a boat and an alligator is heading towards her. Turn the page and you're back with the guy about to throw a spear at Tarzan. You're going, screw that. I want to find out what happens with Jane. So now you read the Tarzan chapter and you really start getting back into it. And then you get to the end. And as Tarzan is being charged by a fierce lion, you turn the page and Jane is now hanging off the boat. And you're going, God damn it! Now I gotta read, you keep ping-ponging between the two storylines. And that really drove into me, as a young reader, the importance of just pulling somebody through a story, at a breakneck pace,
Mm-hmm.
writing stuff that just compels people to keep turning the page. I try to do that with comic books.
What Burroughs did was it related at all? Because I don't know if with being a serialized publication, I mean, those stories published first in magazines, or it was directly as books?
No, they were published. I think they were published in magazines, but they
Yeah.
weren't published one chapter at a time.
Uh-huh.
They were published. They took up the entirety of the magazine.
Okay. Because I was thinking that maybe that was because it being serialized in
No,
a weekly magazine or something.
I don't think so.
Okay, how important is the value of silence for you? In a comic page.
The value of silence.
Yeah, that moment when you can not use balloons or captions just to show characters reflecting.
Oh, well, I mean, basically, you try to use silence to emphasize something that happened before.
Mm-hmm.
You can have you. I will do that on occasion. I would just have a totally silent panel as people will react to what's just happened. Or sometimes I will do a word balloon that just has 3 dots
Mm-hmm.
to convey the notion that the person's going,
Yeah.
not having an actual response. It's something that's useful for underscoring what happened before. And indeed, I have written entire issues that were just silent,
Mm-hmm.
which is fun. Having to depend upon the artist to convey all of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm. I'm asking you because sorry, please go.
No, okay.
No, I was going to say that I'm asking you because I love how you do it. How you do pick those moments of silence, and I think that's something that is really valuable in comics. That lately, I could say we're losing. It has to be over the top at all times. And sometimes I just want, give me a second. Just give me a second to internalize, to absorb what the characters are going through.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking you if you think that's important to keep in mind that sometimes you just have to slow down and let the characters and the readers absorb what's going on.
Yes. For instance, in an upcoming issue of Symbiote Spider-Man, I have an Avenger confronting Kang.
Mm-hmm.
And Kang in this storyline is trying to save the universe. And the Avenger says, why would someone who's interested in conquering the universe, why would someone who just is all about conquering, be interested in saving the universe? And Kang says, okay, let's say you're right. Let's say that I'm all interested in is conquering. Once I conquer, I'm going to want to lead. If everyone's dead, who am I going to lead?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Avenger goes,
Yeah, I need the universe to exist to be able to conquer it.
Exactly. So, and the Avengers really frustrated because Kang has basically outthought them.
Uh-huh.
And they go like, fine, whatever. But you just have to have those moments of understanding.
Mm-hmm. And by the end of the day, for you, is comic storytelling, do you see it as a symphony, as rock and roll, or jazz?
Oh, I would say it's a symphony. I mean, jazz is all about emotions, but symphonies tell entire stories.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I would say it's a symphony.
And it's also, tell me if you agree with me, about the ups and downs. For me, a symphony, you have the big moment, the drums, etc. Then you can go down, tell I can't remember part of the story. Then you go up again, which is your splash page. For me,
Yes.
that's the analogy. Symphony plays like you're reading a comic, at least a superhero comic, if you want to call it like that, because you're always going up, down, stop, boom.
Well, that's pretty much the way that any story should be told. Every story has its ups and downs. I mean, they will teach you that in creative writing classes. That stories have the ups, the downs. They have the climaxes and the pitfalls. Something exciting is happening and things are calm are happening. There are always ups and downs, and that's going to be the same in symphonies. It's going to be the same in comic books, novels, plays, movies. As long as you're telling a story, you have to take breaks. There have to be moments where both the viewers or the readers and the characters have a chance to catch their breath and regroup. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you can always remember the really cool action sequences, but you have to have the sequences in the middle in order to give the action, their power.
Yeah, because as I always say, and I know you will agree, if you have the whole story being action, action, action over the top of the stop, just a moment when it doesn't connect with the reader. It's
Yeah.
just okay, another one, another one. You need to stop it so the reader again can absorb, right?
Yeah. Stories have to have ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play on people's emotions. You want to lift them up and then lower them down. You want to have action moments and you want to have character moments.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely necessary to have those variations,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise the story is going to be too one note.
Yeah.
If you do a story where all that happens is people are talking about their feelings, that's going to be kind of dull.
Mm-hmm.
If all you have is action, people are going to go, "What the hell is this?" I
Yeah.
mean, I can think of only one comic book I ever wrote that was entirely action. I was doing a 6-issue Wolverine story that was coming out on a bi-weekly basis. And because the issues were coming out so close together, I decided that for the second issue, I was going to do a 22-page car chase. That was it. That's all that happens in the issue. It's a 22-page car chase. And a fan actually came up to me at a convention and he said, I was wondering about this issue of Wolverine. I said, yeah. They said, it's a 22-page car chase. I said, yeah. They said, why did you write it? I said, I wanted to see if I could write a 22-page car chase. He said, oh, okay, well, I guess he succeeded. Because my feeling was that if the issues are coming out bi-weekly, you can take an entire issue and have it be nothing but insane mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? Why not? Because the first and third issues are going to be, relatively sane, but just have an entire issue that's just balls to the wall nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, that was the one time that I did it.
So
other than that, you want to have variations.
So format can affect format and periodicity. You know how often it is released.
Right.
Then affect the way you tell a story. Right. If it was a weekly comic with more pages or less pages, it could affect the way you tell the story. Right. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. That's absolutely true. I mean, I haven't written a weekly comic for many, many years, and even then, that was not, it wasn't 22 pages or 20 pages every week. Weekly stories were something like 5 or 6 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, you could have an entire 5 pages be nothing but action because it's 5 pages.
And it's for you when you were writing company owned or creator owned. Does it?
Well, those are two very different things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's do your brain muscles, your writer muscles change a lot because it's your own stuff or company owned stuff, or it's just the same muscles used different ways?
No, I write exactly the same. It doesn't matter whether it's creator owned or company owned. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to tell the best story that I can. The who owns the characters of no relevance at all.
Mm-hmm. And let me see, because we have a lot of questions already. So let's go with these guys, okay? So they don't kill me. Okay. Felipe Brel says, hello, everyone. Pedro Mercader, hello. Mr. David, such an honor. Some of my first comics were your Hulk issues, and it still is one of my favorites. You're the best Hulk writer ever, period. How did you come up with the idea for Mr. Fixit?
Mr. Fixit was actually kind of interesting because what I realized at that point when I was writing the Hulk was that Hulk stories followed a pattern, which was that Bruce Banner would set himself up in some new situation, but he would always be worried that somehow the Hulk was going to show up and screw it up for him, which the Hulk inevitably did. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to change the basic format, to have the Hulk set himself up in some really great situation and be worried that Banner's going to show up and screw it up for him. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, well, what kind of situation would be great for the Hulk? Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have him doing anything criminal. I didn't want him to be a mob enforcer or anything like that. And I came up with the notion that he was a leg breaker for a guy who ran a casino in Las Vegas. It wouldn't be illegal. It would just be kind of sketchy. Mm-hmm. And that's where the fundamental concept of Mr. Fixit. I honestly don't remember where I came up with the idea of calling him Mr. Fixit. Mm-hmm. It just seemed to be the ideal name for him. The guy who's brought into situations to take care of it. Mm-hmm. We have a difficult situation on our hands. So let's bring in Mr. Fixit. He'll take care of it. So why not? I mean, superheroes always have names that reflect what they do. Mm-hmm. Superman, he's super. Batman, he dresses like a bat. Green Lantern, where does he get his power from? Oh, he gets it from a Green Lantern. Green Arrow, I wonder what his weapons are. Oh, green arrows. I mean, names tend to spell out who they are and what they do. So Mr. Fixit seemed to me to be the ideal name for a guy whose job is to take care of things. Mm-hmm. Excuse me.
Bless you.
I named him Joe Fixit because I just wanted to give him some nice, simple, ordinary first name.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to have him call him Bruce because he's not going to be answered to the name Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
So I came up with Joe Fixit. What the hell? Why not?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Locke from Howard says, hello, it's an honor to meet you, master of the Gamma Power. How did you plan the relationship between Hulk and Banner? He means in terms of them, are they the same or they are two different people? And how did you how did you decide on a conclusion for yourself about that?
Well, I was reading up on the Hulk when I first took on the book, and I stumbled over a story that was written by Bill Mantlo, although since then Barry Windsor Smith has said that he came up with the idea, but whatever. And it depicted Bruce Banner's life as a child and his abusive father. And I realized that Bill was setting the stage for what was at the time called MPD, multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
The same thing that people have genuinely suffered from. The notion is that as a child, you're abused and you develop different personalities to handle that abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, what if the Bruce Banner that we have been reading about since issue number 1 has never been a whole person? That he splintered when he was a child and has suffered from multiple personality disorder ever since. It would explain why all of his attempts to cure himself of being the Hulk have never worked. I mean, aside from the obvious one of if he cures himself with the Hulk, then the character's done. So,
Mm-hmm.
The reason was that the problem wasn't the gamma ray bombs. The problem isn't that the gamma radiation created the Hulk. All it did was give physical form to another personality of Bruce Banner's. I mean, yes, granted, in the early days, he changed because of night,
Mm-hmm.
but they quickly did away with that and came up with the notion that he turned into the Hulk because he was angry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that would perfectly track with someone who's MPD,
Mm-hmm.
because if he's becoming angry, he doesn't want to become angry because he's afraid it's going to lead to his father. So if he becomes angry, he literally becomes somebody else entirely, which is always going to happen as long as his personalities are not merged.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I came up with the idea that he suffered from MPD, I realized at that point that eventually I would do a storyline in which I combined all of the Hulk's personalities, and I would eventually turn him into one gestalt being.
Mm-hmm.
A character that I refer to as the merged Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Jenkins later did stories retconning it and calling it Professor Hulk, and just said it was another personality, which kind of pissed me off because no, that's not what I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
He is the merged Hulk. And indeed, I was very pleased to see when they did Avengers Endgame that the merged Hulk showed up.
Mm-hmm.
They eventually said that he eventually did, minus the hypnosis, what I said that he did.
Mm-hmm.
That he combined his personalities and became one gestalt being. And that's that's what I did. The notion that Bruce Banner was not a normal functioning human being until we did the storyline where with hypnosis he blended Bruce Banner and the Grey Hulk and the Green Hulk into one persona, and that became the merged Hulk.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever see him as bipolar, or like
No.
Bruce Hulk, or it was all the time the multiple personality angle was what you had since the beginning?
No. Bipolar is a completely different disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Bipolar is having trouble controlling your emotions, and sometimes
Yeah,
and
that's what I
sometimes
meant. If
down.
it
No.
because your mind to use that, or it was always the multiple personality disorder angle.
Yeah, it was. I never got into bipolar. When I was doing it, it was always multiple personality disorder.
Pedro de Mercader says, "You always surprise me as a reader, but what you do is always logical story wise. How do you keep that balance between uh, the story being making sense and keeping surprising the readers?"
Well, you always want to try and think to yourself, what is the reader going to expect? And then come up with something that the reader doesn't expect. But it has to be logical. It has to be that you tell the story and the reader says, oh my God, I did not see that coming. But wow, he really did lay the groundwork. And when I'm writing a monthly comic, I'll do that all the time. I will throw out little bits and pieces for stories that at the time that I'm throwing them out, I have absolutely no idea where I'm going to go with them, but I will just put them out there. And then eventually I will say, oh, it would fit in great here. This thing would. And then, so I will then reference this thing that I did 2 years earlier. And fans will go, wow, Peter David really plots this stuff out ahead. No. I may make it look like I'm plotting out ahead, but I'm actually just making this up as I go.
How has things changed? How have things changed? Since 20, maybe even 10 years ago, when you knew you could plan ahead. In that sense, leaving doors open because you could go back at any time. And now, when an editor is going to tell you, we have the budget for 8, maybe 10 issues, and then we don't know what's going to happen. So you plan ahead anyway. You leave
I
the
plan. No, I tend to plan ahead for the entirety of the story, but on occasion I do think ahead. For example, when I was working on the outline for the second series of the Maestro called War and Pax, I deliberately ended it on something that set up a potential third series. I had no idea if there was going to be a third series, but I thought, what the hell? I'll put that in there, and if there's never a third series, the fans will go, ah! But, they go, ah, and then they forget about it. And then after I finished the first issue of Series 2, my editor contacted me and said, guess what? We just got approved for a third series. It's like, yay! So now I'm really glad that I set up a third series at the end of issue 5 of Series 2. I'll probably have to set up a fourth series at the end of issue 5 of Series 4. I guess we'll find out.
By the way, Javier Pina is doing an amazing job on that series. I have to plug him.
Thank you.
Atlantia de Ceita. Hi, Peter. Thank you for your great job writing Aquaman and Atlantis Chronicles. I have a question. If DC Comics had let you kill Aquaman, how would you have done it?
Oh, jeez. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I did the story where Aquaman dies. I think I had Poseidon kill him. I don't really remember how, but I think Poseidon killed him with the he got a trident in the chest, as I recall. That Poseidon drove into him, because they figure if he's going to be Aquaman, have him get killed by a god. Why not? So I think that's how I would have had it done.
And why?
Why not?
No, I mean, why did you feel he had to die? How did you feel at that time he had to die?
I thought it would be an interesting storyline. I thought it would be an interesting thing to then do with Aqualad, because Aqualad would become the new Aquaman. And I was going to do about a dozen stories that focused on Aqualad trying to carry on the legacy of Aquaman. And then eventually I was going to bring Aquaman back because, of course. And then, as I recall, DC then the editor said that I couldn't do it, and I quit the book. And a couple of years later, they then pretty much did the exact story that I was going to do. So, fantastic.
Facepalm. Pedro Mercader tells you, what made you come back to Maestro? I loved, capital letters, your Future Imperfect story.
Actually, it's a pretty boring story. The editor wrote to me and said, "Hey, we've got the okay to do a Maestro limited series. You want to write it?" And I went, "Okay, sure." I mean, people always asking me, "How did this happen? How did that happen?" The editors ask me. I mean, how did I get to write Dark Tower? Joe Quesada called me up and said, "Hey, want to write Dark Tower?" Okay, it's you never know. I mean, Steve Wacker, when he was leaving Marvel, published a letter that said they were working on a new Spider-Man 2099 comic book. And he didn't mention who was going to be writing it. And fandom rose up as one and said, "We will totally read Spider-Man 2099 as long as Peter David writes it." And I wasn't scheduled to write it. But Marvel looked at the fan reaction and said, "Wow, we really better get Peter David to write it." And they contacted me, and the editor called me up, and she said, "Would you be interested in writing Spider-Man 2099?" And I, who had been telling people that I wasn't writing it, that Marvel hadn't contacted me, said, "Okay, sure." And she said, "Okay, good. We need a 5-page story by this Friday to run an Amazing Spider-Man number 700. And your first issue is due a week later." And I said, "When is this book coming out?" And she said, "July." And I said, "July? It's May." And she said, "Yes, you're really behind." And it's like, okay then.
But
It's just you
you made it work.
you get the stuff when the editors contact you and say, "Hey, are you interested in writing this?"
Mm-hmm. And in terms of Maestro, going back to him, did you have those stories in mind for years, percolating in your head, or they came up the moment you got the offer?
I always had a background story for the Maestro kind of rattling around in my head, but it wasn't worked out to any great detail.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually developing the story. Hey, Caroline. Actually developing the story was more or less something that I wound up coming up with when I actually started writing the 5-issue first limited series.
Mm-hmm. Felipe Berel tells you, what characters that you have not written yet would you like to write?
I'd like to write Doc Savage.
Mm-hmm.
I think Doc Savage would be tremendously entertaining. I mean, to some degrees, he's one of the very first superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wouldn't mind writing Doc.
Yeah, he's in that group with Doc Savage and the Shadow and those others who predate superheroes, but in a way they are part of the seeds of the germs of what superheroes became, right?
Yep. Hold on. Okay.
Okay. Francisco Sanchez, how were you planning every sub stage, he says, inside your era of the Hulk? What turn of the script? Oh, that Mafia Hulk was an amazing turn of the story of the character. Where did you get those ideas? Did the fact of knowing who was going to write influence that you changed the kind of Hulk you were writing?
No, what changed it was that in those days I had access to sales figures. And if sales started to drop, I would say, "Okay, time to do things to really shake him up." So you can tell when sales are starting to drop because that would be the point where all of a sudden dramatic things happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a really good source of information to be able to see that. I found quite fascinating how Mark Millar grabbed your blind Hawkeye from the last Avengers stories. Do you think that concept influenced Old Man Logan too?
I haven't the faintest idea. You'd have to talk to whoever did Old Man Logan.
There you go. La Atlantia de Zeta Peter, I'm really happy because when I see Jason Momoa, I can see your Aquaman. Would you like to see Arthur Curry lose his hand in Aquaman 2?
Oh yeah, I think that'd be cool if he got a harpoon in the second Aquaman film. Indeed, I actually spoke to Jeff Johns about that, and he said it was a possibility. So let's hope.
Mm-hmm. See, Dante Crotogini, are you reading or aware of Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk? Have you read
Yes,
any of the Hulk books after you left?
yes, I've been reading Immortal Hulk. I think Al's doing some really interesting stuff. Um, and it seems very influenced by the work that I did. I mean, he's got Joe Fixit running around. It's not exactly the way that I portrayed him, but what the hell? He
Mm-hmm.
seems to be going with this whole concept of multiple personality. It now seems to be kind of run amok, but what the hell? I mean, it's sometimes a little tricky for me to follow what the hell is going on. But I'm kind of doing my best. The only objection I had is that he had Doc Samson, coming up from the grave, and he was in a cemetery that was surrounded by crosses, and I'm going, dude, he's Jewish. He wouldn't be buried in a cemetery with crosses. So come on.
but
But other than that, I've been enjoying it.
but that would be more for the editor to tell him,
Yes.
he's Jewish, he shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I'm not blaming Al for that. I mean, it might be that the artist is rude and it wasn't thinking about it. I mean, somebody screwed the pooch on that one. I don't know who, but
Yeah, but I agree. I think he's embracing the multiple personalities angle, but taking it in the other direction. From Order, you took it to get to Order. To get that merge Hulk, and he's taking
yeah,
it exactly the other side, which is going to the chaos part of it, right?
yeah, pretty much.
Grant Moore, this channel is awesome. Thank you, Grant. Peter has a cool black cat in the background.
I do.
I don't know. He says I don't see it.
I own a black cat. That's true. Her name is
Maybe
Mulan.
maybe he was wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. We got her from we got her from an animal rescue shelter.
Mm-hmm.
The poor thing was actually kind of screwed up because her back knees weren't functioning properly.
Oh.
And indeed, she was adopted by some people, and then they wound up returning her. So, the poor thing had rejection issues. Not only that, but when she was out in the wild, she was captured and they spayed her.
Ah.
And what? No, that's fine. They
Okay.
spayed her. But the thing is, when you spay a cat, you're supposed to nick her ear. To let people know that she's spayed.
Okay.
These idiots
now
cut
I
off.
understand spade. Okay.
Right. These idiots cut off the top of her ear, thereby permanently interfering with her ability to hear.
Oh my
Caroline, what the hell is that? Oh, okay.
God. Look from Howard asks.
Hold on.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Jesus Christ. All right.
No way. Look from Howard asks, were you affected by when your regular artists left the Hulk book when they were doing such amazing work like Dale Kuhn or Gary Frank? And he adds, have you decided when Kuhn left the book? Have you already decided you wanted Gary Frank to be the next artist?
I didn't make those decisions. Bobby Chase, who was the editor, chose the artist. Yeah, I thought Gary Frank did a terrific job. I mean, Dale was a tough act to follow, but I thought that Gary was really good. I mean, I was really blessed to work with a succession of artists, all of whom had their own strengths and weaknesses, and I just tried to analyze what the strengths were and play to those.
Mm-hmm. Sergio Colomino Ruiz from Facebook says, I loved what he did with Quicksilver in XFactor. So many years with Pietro, just going around like a headless chicken uh, through the Marvel Universe. And it took Peter just one scene where he's putting together the puzzle to explain
Yes.
the character to everybody.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I was writing. Here's the thing. When Chris Claremont would write the X-Men, he would always tell you what they were thinking. They'd have extensive thought balloons that tracked every freaking thought that was going through their heads. And I didn't write like that. I felt that I wanted people to deduce things on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And the readers weren't accustomed to that. And people were complaining in XFactor that the characters were really shallow and that I had no idea what made them tick. And I said, okay, well, I'm obviously going to have to spend one issue just exploring what's going through their heads. And I thought about it and I thought, okay, well, they're a government group. They probably have to be, if they've gone through something that's traumatic, they're probably going to have to sit down and be debriefed by psychiatrists.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have it be Leonard Sampson, who's pretty much the only psychiatrist in the Marvel Universe,
Mm-hmm.
just like Mark Spector is the only cab driver. If you get in a cab in New York City, Mark Spector is driving it. Doesn't matter where you are, he's always driving it. Same deal. And I decided to do an entire 22 pages of the characters doing nothing but freaking talking about themselves so that fans would now understand what was going through their heads. And coming up with Quicksilver was incredibly easy because I have indeed stood online at an ATM behind someone who doesn't know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Or been standing at a post office behind someone who wants to know every possible way to send a package to Istanbul. And that drives me completely nuts. And I thought to myself, how bad must it be for Quicksilver? Because he's basically surrounded by this all the time. His thoughts, his thoughts and reflexes are so fast and so rapid fire that he has to slow himself to a crawl to deal with the ordinary world. And that must really set his teeth on edge. And I had him explain it to Doc Samson in exactly those words.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flooded by support from fans who said, I have hated Quicksilver for 25 years. Now I totally understand him. I totally get him. Because I too have been stuck behind someone who doesn't know how to use an ATM.
Mm-hmm.
Curiously, nobody ever wrote in and said, I still don't know how to use an ATM, and I don't appreciate you making fun of me. No one wrote in for that. Indeed, some years later, Evan Peters, who played him in the X-Men films, was on a panel at San Diego, and the MC asked him, what are your feelings about Quicksilver? And Evan said, have you ever been stuck online in an ATM behind someone who doesn't know how to use it? Thank God I was not in the audience because I would have stood up and I would have gone, dude, that's what I said about Quicksilver. Don't you have your own freaking opinions? But yeah, it just seemed to make so much sense that someone who is so accustomed to being able to move so quickly must be driven absolutely insane by the simple act of going through the world 1 second at a time.
Yeah, that was amazing because I remember people used to see him as the arrogant guy who was just around and had no reasons to be arrogant because he was just, one more character that was a nobody in the Marvel Universe until you gave him, we go back to what you said before. We go back to the motivation. We go back to why is he the way he is? Because, we are turtles around him and it feels like we don't move. And everything we do for him is just, can you move? I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for us, it's got to be torture to live around turtles at all times.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Pedro Mercader says, how and why did you decide to bring back the sadly forgotten long shot in XFactor?
I honestly don't remember. It was 20 years ago. I honestly don't remember why I brought back. I mean, I remember why I brought back Shatterstar, but I don't remember why I brought back Longshot.
Okay, why did you bring back Shadowstar? Now that you mention
it, who remembers? No, I brought back Shatterstar just to give Richter something to do.
Okay.
I wanted to have someone to interact with Richter.
Mm-hmm. Miguel Ángel Montes de Oca, excellent show. Thank you, Miguel Ángel. Does Peter notice any difference between the subjects that he could put into his scripts in his comics before and the subject he can talk about now?
I'm not sure I understand.
He means if you have notice any limitations in terms of the subjects you can talk.
Oh,
you can talk in your scripts or not.
Well, there were points where I hit limitations. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, Target, I think it was Target, it might have been Walmart, some store decided to take all the North Star action figures, and indeed all the mutant action figures, and stop carrying them because North Star had come out as gay. And they were worried that they were going to get blowback from parents. So they said they were going to stop carrying all the mutant figures. And word came down from on high at Marvel, no more controversial things in our books. And at that time, I was doing a storyline in XFactor in which I had this doctor develop a test for children in utero that would be able to determine if the child, as of even 1 or 2 months, while in the womb, was going to be a mutant. And that if the child was going to be a mutant, the parent could then decide to have the pregnancy terminated. In the same way that they do amniocentesis, and if they discover that the child is mentally screwed up profoundly,
mm-hmm.
they can decide to have the child terminated. And that was the original story that I wrote, and it was very powerful. And editorial came back to me and they said, we can't do a storyline in which women are considering having abortions. I said, why not? It's legal. And they said, we can't do it. And they wound up changing the story so that if they discovered that the child was going to be a mutant, that surgery could be done that would correct the mutant gene, which made no sense at all. No sense at all. And I was really kind of pissed off about that. And this whole thing about don't do anything controversial went on for several years. And I can tell you exactly when it was lifted. It was when I scripted, I think it was Hulk number 417, the one in which I had one of the members of the Pantheon flat out state that he was gay.
Mm-hmm.
That was when it was lifted. They said, the whole thing about you can't do anything explicit, something that's controversial, forget that. We've moved beyond that. And I had him state that he was gay in the very next issue.
Mm-hmm. Good. Francisco Sanchez, where did you get that obsession, he puts the brackets, not me, for getting your character into parallel worlds so much?
Into parallel worlds?
Yeah, he says you use parallel worlds.
I'm not sure what he's talking about.
Parallel worlds, parallel universe, multiverse.
I don't know that I have an obsession with it. I mean, have I done stories in parallel universes? Well, yeah, but it's just a kind of part of the whole Marvel universe that we live in. I mean, we established that the main Marvel universe happens in universe number 616. Wherever the hell they got that number, I really don't know. I have done stuff that wanders into other universes, but it's not something I'm particularly obsessed with.
Mm-hmm. Pedro Mercader wants to tell you your Pip the Troll being an internet troll joker will make me laugh forever.
Thank you. Yeah, I was actually very excited when I found out that Peter Dinklage was going to be in Infinity War, because I'm going, oh God, please let him be playing Pip the Troll, because I actually had a storyline in which Pip the Troll is at a bar and a woman mistakes him for Peter Dinklage, even though they look nothing alike. But the fact that they're both dwarves was enough for them to go, is like, are you a guy from Game of Thrones? Yes, I am. So I'm going, oh God, please let me be Pip the Troll. You gotta give Marvel Comics credit for casting Peter Dinklage as the biggest character in the entire Marvel universe, aside from Giant Man, who's only like that for very short periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
They cast Peter Dinklage as a 30-foot tall giant. I don't know where they came up with that idea, but I thought it was nothing short of brilliant.
Yeah, for me it was genius because it's again playing with the expected. As you say, oh, of course, Infinity Stones. Maybe Warlock is going to show up. Of course, Pip the Troll. We're dealing with Jim Starlin story, so maybe
Yeah.
of course, Pip the Troll is going to be there. Or Peter Dinklage. Oh, so it's Pip the Troll. And then
Yeah.
you see him as a giant, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, Miguel Ángel Montes de Oca, are you? Can you choose the artist you're going to work with, or that's always about the editor's job?
Both. I mean, back when I first started writing The Incredible Hulk,
Mm-hmm.
Bob Harris brought me into his office and showed me artwork from this young guy that he wanted to have draw the Hulk. He had actually wanted him to draw another book, but the writer did not want to work with him because he was, kind of young and raw.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed me the artwork, and I could see where there were problems with his storytelling style, but I also thought he had some real potential. And I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I can work with this Todd McFarlane guy. And that's where Todd's career at Marvel started off.
Mm-hmm.
If I said, no, let's get somebody else, well, Todd would end up doing something else, I'm sure. But, I gave him that lift. I chose the artist who drew Aquaman. Um, uh, Marty Eklund, I think
Mm-hmm.
it was. Because the editor sent me a book of artists who were represented by a guy named Mike Friedrich.
Mm-hmm.
And I was paging through the artwork, and I found Marty's samples, and I went, him. This guy is perfect. This is the guy I want drawing it. And I thought Marty did a terrific job with Aquaman.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the story that I wrote called Future Imperfect, that was originally a story I developed for an Italian artist
Mm-hmm.
who specialized in doing post-apocalyptic stories. And Bobby asked me to come up with a post-apocalyptic story for this guy, which I did, but he dropped out. But Bobby really liked the story. So she said, well, let's see if we can get an artist for it. And one day I was in this office. It's what we in America call docs in a box. It's basically an urgent care place where you can bring a child. You can go in, or you can bring your kid in if you have some sort of medical emergency and your normal doctor isn't available, but you don't want to have to go to a hospital emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
It's for small stuff. If your heart's failing, you go to an emergency room. If your kid banged himself up, you can go to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought my daughter Gwen, because she had fallen and she banged up her forehead, to our local docs in a box. And who should be sitting there but George Perez? And I'm going, George, hi. And we start chatting, and George says to me, I would love to work with you on something. And I said, I have just the story for you. And I described Future Imperfect. And George said, that sounds fantastic. I'm in. And I wound up calling up Bobby Chase and I said, okay, I've got an artist for Future Imperfect. And she said, what? And I said, I've got an artist for Future Imperfect. I've offered him the gig. He's on board. And Bobby says, you can't do that. You can't offer an artist a job. Who's the artist? I said, George Perez. And Bobby said, okay.
I can, knowing Bobby, I can even see her face.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing I said you can't offer artists.
Bobby could be like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. George Perez, yeah, okay, we're on for that. And George, Future Imperfect remains one of my favorite things to this day. So when I have chosen the artist, it's always worked out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the artist is chosen by the editor.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the last time I chose an artist was I was going to, I was working on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And I was doing a 2-part Mysterio story. And they said, we're going to need an artist for this. They said, do you have any suggestions? And I said, Todd Nauck.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, nah, we're not really wild about Todd Nauck. And I said, Todd can draw anything.
That's true.
You want to get Todd Nauck. And I bitched at the editors until they finally offered it to Todd. And I sent Todd off the script for issue number 1. And a week or so later, I get a call from the editors, and they're going, we're getting back pages from Todd Nauck already. And they're really good. And I went, well, yeah. And they said, can you make this a 3-parter instead of a 2-parter? And I went, okay. And I wound up pulling out the dead Mysterio and put him into the story. And that made it 3 parts.
Mm-hmm.
And then our regular artist left. And they said, fine, we're going to give the rest of the series to Todd. And Todd wound up drawing the rest of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which then led to him doing a 1-shot about Barack Obama that made national news.
Yes.
And he's been drawing from Marvel ever since.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's true. Dante Gratiglione, I'm glad somebody gets it. So many writers will leave the fights to the artist and draw a generic fight that then the writer has to cover with word balloons, so it makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, again, the way the character fights is an extension of the personality.
Absolutely.
So you really need to spell out what's happening, because, as I said, Captain America doesn't fight the same way that the Hulk fights. Mm-hmm. Nor does Captain Marvel.
Absolutely.
So you really have to try and tailor it. Supergirl doesn't fight the same way that Superman does.
Mm-hmm. Yes, completely different backgrounds, completely different experience that shape the character to become the fighter he or she is, right? As you were saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Pedro Mercader tells me your death of Gideon Wolf was one of the most dramatic Spider-Man stories. How did you come with that grounded project that goes far beyond a Spider-Man story? The Sin Eater could exist. That villain is really scary. He says that the Sin Eater could be a real person. That villain is really scary.
Well, Sin Eaters are real people. I mean, that a Sin Eater, for those who don't know, in more kind of Ozark type, societies, when somebody dies, food is put there to, on the person's chest to symbolize their sins. And the Sin Eater comes in and eats the food off their chest, so that he literally absorbs their sins so that they can then go to the next life free of sins. And when I found out about this, I thought that was fascinating. And what if we had a villain who was all about sins?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that made him interesting was that I took a notion from something that that Isaac Asimov put forward, which is that if you want to fool audiences into underestimating a character, have them speak in a sort of Yiddish intonation. When they speak, take the verb and put it to the end of the sentence. And people will frequently then underestimate this character. Why do you think Yoda talked the way that he did?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was a small creature who talked like an elderly Jewish guy. So you know, it didn't even occur to you that this guy is a Jedi master.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously just in there for comedy relief.
Mm-hmm.
So when I introduced Stan Carter, if you're wondering who the Sin Eater is, it's not like there were a lot of suspects. There were no suspects.
Mm-hmm.
Stan Carter was the only guy that he could possibly be because I introduced him for this storyline. I didn't introduce 4 different guys and you're wondering. Stan was it. And I decided that the way to throw suspicion off Stan was to make him a middle-aged Jewish guy. You know, so that he wouldn't be a threat, you know, because, you know, someone who talks like this, do I? You know, that's not going to be a threat. And indeed, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fans wrote in loving Stan. They said, this guy's obviously the replacement for Gene DeWolf, and it's going to be Spider-Man's new direct means of communicating with the police. No, he's not. But the fans didn't realize that. And even though I introduced Sin Eater and gave nobody else that he could possibly be as a suspect, the fact that he was Stan Carter flew under the radar of the majority of the fans.
Mm-hmm. Jason Ayala says, about you, of course, the legend. Josep Ventosa says Babylon 5. Like
Okay.
this.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Daniel Veladez, hello everyone. Hello, Daniel. Capita Fantastic Arades, what an amazing dialogue writer and big storyline writer we've enjoyed for so many years. You're a genius, Mr. David.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
He says, why, Francisco Sanchez asked you, why did you have that controversy with some of the Image comics creators? Were they too cocky?
The whole thing with the Image guys was that when I was writing my column, all I did was subject them to the same scrutiny to which I subjected people at Marvel Comics and people at DC Comics. I was openly critical of things that guys from Marvel and DC said, and I was working for Marvel and DC. And Marvel and DC didn't take issue with it. Image took issue with it because all I did was respond to the things that they said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you like Eric Larson saying that they've been, you know, like dogging it up until that they've been holding back. That's it. They've been holding back their best creations, and I'm going, holding back? What the hell are you talking about? You know, why haven't you been giving it your all? And they said that, you know, they're a group of friends who are going to be getting into business together. And I said, hey, group of friends in business, that's an incendiary combination. I hope you all have, you know, good lawyers making your dealings. And they hated that I said that. Now, this is for a year or two later when they wound up throwing Rob Liefeld out of Image. And they said, we're not going to have one spokesman. We're all going to be spokesmen. And I said, that's ridiculous. You can't do it that way because you're going to have 6 or 7 guys contradicting each other. You need to have one spokesman talking on behalf of Image. And they told me that I didn't know what I was talking about until 6 months to a year later when they installed Jim Lee as their spokesman. You know, they absolutely detested all the things that I said before then winding up doing what I said they should do. So, you know, they just kind of assumed that all, you know, even though that I was simply holding them up to the same scrutiny that I was holding everybody else up, for me, it must somehow be something personal. You know, no, it wasn't. I didn't give the slightest of damns that they were going to create their own company. Let them create their own company. Let them turn stuff out. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Why would anyone who's sane object to that?
Absolutely. Rediac 55. Hi, Peter Daniel from Panama. I'm a big fan of your spectacular Spider-Man run. Taking MJ aside, how could you have developed the Peter and Felicia relationship if they have not broken up?
Oh, I would have eventually had them break up. I mean, Felicia is just too flighty
Mm-hmm.
an individual. I mean, I could see Peter Parker eventually proposing to her, and her initially accepting before realizing that this was way off the deep end, and that she would probably just wind up bolting town or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't see Felicia and Peter's being a long-term thing. I mean, for one thing, she couldn't stand it when he didn't have the mask on.
That's kind of important, yes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem.
Let me see. Pedro Soft, hello, Pedro.
Hello.
Dante Cotregrini says 616 is from Alan Moore's Captain Britain.
It is?
The multiverse.
Okay, I mean, we didn't publish Captain Britain, but okay.
Yeah, the Marvel UK Captain Britain, the issues he wrote there.
Oh, Marvel UK. Okay. Oh, Captain Britain. Okay, no, I was screwing the character up.
Mm-hmm.
It is really okay.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Moore. Damn you, Moore. It figures. Okay.
Pedro de Mercader is asking you if is that a baby Yoda behind you?
Yes. Yeah. Hold on. Actually, I have two baby Yodas. This one I got from Disney.
Nice.
Yeah. And then this one I got from Build-A-Bear. He actually also talks. Hold on. He also plays.
That's amazing.
He plays the music.
Where did you get that one?
From Build-A-Bear.
Uh-huh.
Hold on. Let's just play this one.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, they've actually now come out with a new Baby Yoda that's actually walks and talks and all that kind of thing. But you know what? I think that's too much. I have two Baby Yodas. That's.
No, you gotta send me the link for that one, for the last one you sent, because Christmas is coming and I have a 6-year-old.
Oh, perfect.
The other one, I kind of believe Santa Claus is already bringing it.
Oh, okay.
Because Disney Store, he moves there.
Yes.
She's not close and doesn't speak English, so she's getting it from Santa Claus. But that one with the music and all that,
yeah.
Please, if you can send me the link, I would love it.
Sure.
Let me see. I have other question here.
Actually, I think you've gone through all the questions.
Yes, but somebody's sending me, believe it or not, a question through a private Facebook. So I'm like, what?
Okay.
Probably using the wrong screen. Hi, David. I don't know if there is time, but if you can ask him from the fellow who introduced him that time, what he remembers from the time he came to Asturias and got the Hackster Award.
Oh, what do I remember about getting the Hackster Award? Oh, that was cool. I love that. I mean, that's a really nice award. It's a statue that's like that tall.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going up on stage and accepting it and doing the Macarena for some reason. What really was exciting was transporting it back, because I was not going to put that thing into my luggage. So I actually carried that thing onto an airplane, and the security people were kind of suspicious of it. I think they thought it had a gun in it, or maybe a hand grenade or something. And they really scrutinized that award, because people don't generally bring trophies through.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It's still down in my office.
Mm-hmm. That was Jordi, the guy who gave you the award at the ceremony. That's
excellent.
Luck from Howard says the nomenclature 616 it was invented in Captain Britain. He meant.
No, I understand what he meant.
Yeah, we got it. Reddick 55 says one of my favorite Spider-Man stories is Leah. Can you share what was the creation process, especially in the context of that Spider-Man era?
Marvel wanted me to write a short Spider-Man story. And I wasn't sure what to write. And I had a close friend named Leah who was dying. I mean, I don't remember exactly what it was, but she was in the hospital. And the last time I saw her, she was in a kind of a coma. And wait, can you hold on a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Here, let me see. And she was dying, and the last time that I saw her, oh, thank God. The last time I saw her, she was unconscious, and I kissed her on the cheek. And in her coma, she reached up and touched her face like this and smiled. That was the last time I saw her. And a day or so later, I got up, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. And the idea for the story had popped into my head. It was basically a modern day retelling of The Little Match Girl. I make no bones about that. And the story just popped into my head. And I found out in the morning that Leah had passed away at about 2 a.m. And I kind of told myself that that story was a parting gift from her. So when I actually wrote the story, naturally I named it after her.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But that Leah was based on a woman named Leah Adizio.
Mm-hmm. Lord from Howard says, how did the Saxon Violence project was born?
I was originally going to introduce Saxon Violence as characters in The Incredible Hulk. And then I came to the realization that they didn't really fit in with The Incredible Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
That story, that a woman who knew judo and self-defense and a guy carrying guns would not last more than a page against the Incredible Hulk. But the characters would not leave my head. And I later wound up pitching them as a story, to Joe Duffy and Archie Goodwin of Epic Comics. And Joe and Archie absolutely fell in love with it, and they gave me a contract to do a 4-issue limited series. Well, now all we needed was an artist. And then George Perez was finishing up Future Imperfect. And George said, I'd love to work with you on another project. And I said, I think I may have something in mind for you. And I described Saxon Violence to him. And I was unaware that George was kind of into drawing kinky stuff. So George was totally on board with it. And his suggestion was, can we take Sax and make her Latina? And I said, sure. I mean, her original name was Jennifer Jean Sax. I made her Juanita Jean Sax. Mm-hmm. Why not? She was still JJ, but he liked the idea of drawing a Latina girl. And, being George, he just knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm. So the questions that we got before we started, there were some questions that Felipe Gonzalez left in YouTube that we can see on Restream, but they are there on YouTube. So
okay.
Felipe Gonzalez said before, Dear Peter, I discovered your work on that issue of XFactor with the aftermath of Muir Island, and I have followed him ever since. His work and the quality of his characters and dialogue are really impressive. Okay. Your era in XFactor are good proof of this. You managed to create or build the characters in a magical and realistic way. and a good balance between seriousness and fun. How did you achieve that?
How did I achieve it?
The balance, yeah, the balance of the force.
Yeah, really. I mean, well, actually, I will mention that my wife actually contributed something significant in that she was the one who pointed out that when Jamie Madrox creates dupes, all the dupes think like him. And wouldn't it be interesting if as he created dupes, they had different personality aspects? I mean, all of us have different aspects of our personality. We behave differently with our friends than we do with our spouses. We behave differently with our spouses than we do with our children, differently with our children than we do with our parents. Everybody has different ways that they react. They have different things that they think about. Um, wouldn't it be interesting if Madrox's personalities were all different aspects of Jamie Madrox? Some of them nuts, some of them dangerous. Um, wouldn't that be interesting? So I came up with that. I came up with the notion of explaining why that was, and indeed, that was the major underpinning for Jamie Madrox, and the fans seemed to love it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was helpful, but it's just a matter of thinking about the characters logically. I mean, probably the most interesting character that I wrote was Layla Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the reason Layla Miller showed up was because Brian Bendis was introducing her in House of X. And he wanted her to be a regular in X Factor. He wanted her to be a regular somewhere. Because if she became a regular in X Factor, for instance, then House of X would simply be the storyline which introduced Layla Miller. If she then just vanished from the Marvel Universe after House of X, it would be more apparent that she was simply a plot device to help House of X work. So I read up on Layla, what he had done, and I said, okay, I have some thoughts on her, but how about if I do this with her? And Brian is going, do whatever you want with her. As long as she's called Layla Miller, I'm good with it. And so I came up with this running thing of that, I'm Layla Miller. I know stuff. And, when I first introduced her, fans are going like, okay, well, she's a smart ass little kid. And then about 3 issues in, I did this storyline with this guy who breaks into X Factor headquarters to kill them all. And Layla winds up taking the guy out because she did stuff in the issue that set up him dying, stepping onto water and being electrocuted because of a leak that she knew about, and that kind of thing. And as the guy is lying there dying, and all the lights are out, Layla is standing over him, and she says, don't worry, when you die, no one's really going to miss you. Your wife will be glad. Your mother will be a little upset, but she'll get over it. And he looks up at her and he says, "Who are you?" And she shines a flashlight up at her face and she says, "I'm Layla Miller. I know stuff." And clicks off the light. And all of fandom went, "Holy crap. Who is this kid?" Layla in that one sequence went from being this annoying kid to the most terrifying character in X Factor. And that's fine. And the characters just kind of developed. I mean, I had Monet
Mm-hmm.
announce that she was Muslim at a time when people were just really hating Muslims. And fans wrote in and they said, "How is it Peter David's saying that she's Muslim? Where did that come from?" And I said, "Have you looked at where she grew up? 90% of the people where she grows up are Muslim. What the hell are you talking about? She doesn't cover her head." Okay, well, not all Muslims do.
Yeah,
Just like not all Jews wear yarmulkes.
exactly.
You know? But I had her saying I'm Muslim, and fans a lot of fans are upset about it, but screw them.
I can tell you
And
that in Spain, sorry to interrupt, it's just read like she's a Muslim. Okay, so what?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
Maestro, for us it was like she's from the part of the world she is. Of course,
Yeah,
it's normal. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I still remember probably the most dramatic thing I ever did was when I explicitly stated that Shatterstar and Richter were gay,
mhm.
because we'd been hinting around at this for like 10 years or so. And we hadn't been explicit about it. I said, you know what? Screw it. This is the 21st century. Why are we hedging our bets about this? So I had Shatterstar and Richter kiss, and to me, it was no big deal. It was actually panel 5 of a 6-panel page. It wasn't a full page like, oh my God, they're kissing. It was panel 5 of 6 panels. But the internet erupted, and like 95% of the people loved it. I mean, they just freaking loved it.
Yeah.
One of the few people who objected to it was Rob Liefeld, who said, no, 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 no. No, Shatterstar's not gay. He's like an ancient Greek warrior. And it's like, dude, don't you know what the ancient Greek warriors did on the night before battle? They
Mhm.
stripped the boys who were carrying their weapons,
Yeah.
of all things. So
Yeah.
that set it off into another whole range. Now, what was really interesting about it was that a number of fans came up to me in later years, and they all thought they were telling me a unique story, but they were in fact all telling me the exact same story, which was that they were gay and in the closet,
Mhm.
and they were actually contemplating suicide because they couldn't live with the notion of living in the closet anymore, but they couldn't bring themselves to tell their family and friends. And then they saw how fandom reacted to the revelation of Richter and Shatterstar.
Yeah.
And the fact that 95% of people had no issue with it or approved it made them reassess their thoughts on the matter.
Mhm.
And every single one of them came out to their friends and family. And in every single instance, their friends and family said, yeah, we know. We, we didn't press you on it because you didn't seem to want to discuss it, but we knew you were gay. We're not stupid.
We're your family.
Yeah, we're your friends. We're your family. We know you're gay. The fact that you never show any interest in women was kind of a clue. And I just found it fascinating that all these people were thinking of ending their lives until they decided to be honest
Mhm.
and discovered that they could, in fact, live their lives out in the open and not lose the love of their friends and family.
Absolutely.
And every single one of them thanked me for that. So probably outing Richter and Shatterstar was probably one of the most important things that I ever did.
Absolutely. And also, but also, I want to give you credit for that because it wasn't. There's other cases where you can see it's something that was never thought of until the moment when it's useful, to say it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make this character gay. Of many cases like that. But in your case, it was, if you read
It
the
was
story
hinted at.
exactly, if you read the story, it was coming.
Yeah.
It wasn't like just because it's like I remember reading it just years ago, and I was like, yeah, like we just said about Monet. It's something
Yeah.
that you take for granted because it's there. So
Yeah, exactly. It just makes it's not like somebody said, you know what? Screw it. Peter Parker's bisexual. Wait, what? You know. Um Although the funny thing was a couple of years later, I was asked to do a panel at San Diego called Gays in Comics.
mhm,
And it wasn't about gay creators, it was about gays in comics. And after the panel, there were these like 3 guys who were standing kind of much closer to me than normal body distance indicates should be, right? And I wasn't saying anything, it was a little weird. And when one of them said to me, "We think it's really great that you use your own homosexuality as a basis for writing." And I said, um, "I'm not homosexual." And they went, "Yeah, right." And I said, "No, really, guys, I'm not gay. I'm straight." And they went, "Yeah, sure you are." And I said, "Guys, I'm married and I have 3 children." And they went, "So?" It's like, I mean, it's like, good Lord, I've been married twice and now I have 4 children. What more do I have to do to indicate that I'm straight? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, they got their mind set up.
Yeah.
Let me see. As Felipe Gonzalez clarified, yes, that's why he was sending it at the beginning. I'm not going to have the chance to write this during the live show, so I have the questions already written. Sorry, I had to do it this way, but I have no other way to do it.
All right.
I have to say I loved your eras in Supergirl, Falling Angel, Aquaman, and Young Justice.
Good.
So diverse and interesting series. How did you overcome the challenge of creating or developing those characters?
Well, all those characters? I mean, that's a lot of freaking characters, dude. Okay, let's start. Repeat the characters in order for me.
Yeah, Supergirl.
Okay, Supergirl. Supergirl was interesting because they were going to be doing a Supergirl series, and they offered it to John Byrne, who had created the current incarnation of Supergirl, and John wasn't interested. And once I sat down and started studying the character, I could see why he wasn't interested. I mean, talk about tortured origins. She is an artificial being from an alternate universe who is a shape changer that happens to look like Supergirl for no particular reason and has the personality of Lana Lang, and she was created by an alternate version of Lex Luthor. I mean, Jesus Christ. So the first thing I said was, I got to do something to ground her to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have it be that she's Supergirl for a freaking reason. This whole shape-shifting thing, I mean, that she looks like Supergirl, but she could look like Superman, or she could look like a file cabinet. I mean, that's just not going to work for me. And I came up with the idea that she was going to merge herself with a dying human female.
Mm-hmm.
And that she would then have a secret identity. That I wasn't going to do the Captain Marvel Rick Jones thing, that she was going to have one basic personality, and she was going to have Supergirl's personality, but all of Linda's memories.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was going to discover that Linda was actually a pretty much evil, bitch. And now I was going to be telling a story of redemption, that she was going to be doing everything she could to fix Linda's life,
Mm-hmm.
and try to have Linda Danvers, who I named after her original, Silver Age version, have Linda Danvers lead a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the stories that I wrote. Also, I was trying to think of stories that I could tell that had not really been told in other super books.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that because Superman is vulnerable to magic, we hadn't really done a lot of stories about that. And that I thought it would be interesting to do a series that focused, rather on standard super things, focus on theology.
Mm-hmm.
And the storyline just kind of grew from there. The whole concept of her being an angel stemmed from the notion that I wanted to simplify her life.
Mm-hmm.
The original Supergirl is, who is she? She's Superman's cousin. Okay, that's simple. The John Byrne Superman, as I said, had this insane backstory. So I wanted to simplify her now. And I thought, Supergirl, who is she? She's an angel. Okay, I get by that. She's an Earth angel. What is an Earth angel? Well, an Earth angel is an angel who's created when somebody saves the life of somebody else, in this particular fashion. So that's where that story came from. What are the other ones?
Let me see.
Supergirl.
You said Supergirl. This screen hates me. This moves. Yeah, the Falling Angel, Aquaman, and Young Justice.
Jesus, all right.
Just,
Fallen Angel.
Just pick.
No. Fallen Angel developed because I had storylines that I was going to do with Supergirl that all got shit canned when the book was canceled. And I went out to lunch with Dan DiDio, and Dan said, "What were you going to do?" And I described it to him. And Dan said, "We're going to be starting a line of comic books that are aimed at females. Do you think you could adapt this into an original character and an original series, which you would own, and that we could publish as part of this line?" And I knew the line was going to fail, because if you're doing a line that you're specifically saying is going to be aimed at females, you're basically telling about 80 to 90% of the market, you're not going to be interested in this. So I knew the line was going to tank, but I said, sure, what the hell, why not? Indeed, Fallen Angel lasted the longest. It lasted something like 18, 20 issues. And once the book was canceled, Chris Ryle from IDW contacted me and said, we want to continue Fallen Angel. And once Fallen Angel went over to IDW, I then decided to toss the entire notion that she might be Linda Lee Danvers, because it's a totally different company. So that's when I put forward her origin, in which we explicitly stated that she was an actual fallen angel. Why not? That's the title of the series. Aquaman and Young Justice.
Yes.
Aquaman came about. They offered me Aquaman, and I decided I wanted to shake things up. The first thing I did was decide that he had, with everything that he had gone through, that he pretty much just locked himself away in the Aqua Cave and just sat there reading the Atlantis Chronicles. Why not? And since he wasn't taking care of himself, I figured that he would have a beard, and I gave him long hair. The reason I gave him long hair was very simple. I wanted to have something that could constantly indicate that he was underwater. So if he had long hair, the hair could always be floating around, however the artist wanted to do it, kind of like the Little Mermaid. So I gave him the long hair and the beard. The harpoon was a storyline that I came up with because I wanted to really underscore the notion that this guy was a badass. And previously, if Aquaman would just walk into a room and be like, "Oh, hi, Aquaman, how you doing?" If this guy walks in with long hair, long beard, and a freaking harpoon on his arm, you're going to go like, hello, can I help you? I like the idea of harpoon because it was a weapon that the surface world uses against the creatures of the seas. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a creature of the sea having this weapon to use against surface world. So that's where the idea of the harpoon came from. It was not a hook. I have no idea why people keep freaking calling it a hook. It wasn't a hook. It wasn't shaped like a hook. It didn't look like a hook. Look at a picture of Captain Hook. Was that a hook on his hand? Yes. Is that a hook on Aquaman's hand? No. It's a freaking harpoon.
Okay. And
so I really hope that if they ever do it in the movies, that I hope people call it a hook, and he goes, "It's a harpoon." Young Justice was tricky because since all the characters were in their own comic books, I wasn't sure how much latitude I'd have to do character development, because I'd always have to be reacting to whatever else was going on in their own books. The other thing that became a little bit tricky about Young Justice was that it was about 3 teenage boys. And the truth was that I didn't really understand teenage boys, even though I was one. When I was a teenage boy, I had no friends. I was pretty much lonely. So I didn't really understand teenage boys very much. That's why, as of issue 4, I introduced the girls. teenage girls, I understood. I had 2 at the time already. So, and they had all their friends. So teenage girls, I really felt like I could get behind. And so Young Justice became a story that was told from the point of view of the girls.
Mm-hmm.
The girls are reacting to the boys. And as of that point, I was then able to start to understand the boys because I was seeing them through the girls' point of view. And from that point on, the series then became a lot of fun to write.
Mm-hmm.
And every so often, there would be some sort of major development in one of the other books that I would try to incorporate into mine. But other than that, it really, like for example, when Superboy was replaced by Match, I lay the groundwork for that, and then I had Superboy start acting differently in the comic book. And then when we did the reveal about Match, I did the reveal in Young Justice.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was able to adapt to it. The funny thing was, Superboy's and and Impulse's books were eventually canceled. And I actually did a scene where Superboy and Impulse and the Ray are sitting in a kitchen at Young Justice headquarters, and they're all bitching about that their books were canceled. Now, I don't have them say the books that we were in were canceled, but I have them talking about, their books, their favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all bitching about, it's just so unfair. People's books get canceled and other books just keep going and going and they never stop. And they're going, yeah, I really hate that. It's so unfair. And in walks Robin, whose book has not been canceled. And Robin says, hi, how you doing? And they all glare at him and he goes, okay, what did I do now? And they go, nothing. And it's just a nice little kind of underscore thing about that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And his last one is, I also love your Hulk and consider it the definitive version. You're like Claremont, but in green. Okay.
Okay.
Do you remember how many stories have you written for Bruce Banner? Also, your returns have always been excellent.
How many stories I've written? Well, they were all about Bruce Banner. I mean, the Hulk was just simply another aspect of Bruce's personality. So, Bruce was in all of them. He informed everything that happened, even when he was Joe Fixit.
Mm-hmm.
The Fixit was always worried that Banner was going to show up and screw things up, which of course Bruce eventually did.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically wrote 12 years worth of stories about Bruce Banner.
Mm-hmm. Stefano Martino asks you, hello, question from Facebook. Hello, question. Has Mr. David have any problem in any scenes or stories? I mean, problems with editors or pressures from the publishers you've worked with. Salutations and congratulations for your marvelous career.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've had problems from time to time. Aquaman, for example. I was writing Aquaman, and the editor kept giving me conflicting directions.
Mm-hmm.
He would say to me, I wanted stories that have a political bent, but I don't want stories set in Atlantis. I want to do stories where Aquaman is shown as a leader. I want him to do. I want stories where Aquaman is acting solo. How can I have him being a leader if he's solo? Follow me, boys. Oh, nobody here. The contradictions became so overwhelming that I wound up leaving the book because I just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
XFactor, my original run of XFactor, I got fed up because every 3 to 4 issues, I would have to stop what I was writing because it was time for another freaking crossover.
Yeah, I knew he was going to say that.
Yeah. And also the editors kept changing my stories,
mm-hmm.
which made me nuts. For example, I had a storyline in which Rain was becoming more and more obsessed with Havoc.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I did a storyline in which she's walking down the street and all these dogs are barking.
Mm-hmm.
And she's wondering why they're all barking. And she slowly comes to the realization that they are reacting to her because she's in heat.
Mm-hmm.
And she now understands why she's so obsessed with Havoc. She's in heat. And they wound up saying, no, we can't have her be in heat. I'm going, why not? Dogs are in heat all the time. It's something that makes perfect sense. And no, they wound up just changing the dialogue after the book, after I had already written it, in which they took out the whole thing about her being in heat. And that was, to me, the final straw. I said, I'm not going to have it be that they're just changing my dialogue after I've done the book.
Absolutely. Lofren Howard says, did you find the Heroes Return project a pain in the ass, or you enjoyed it? Because that's...
Oh, Heroes Return?
Yeah.
Oh, I had a lot of fun with that. What happened was Bob Harris called an editorial conference, and it was me and like 20 other writers in one large room in a hotel in Long Island. And we were all pitching around ideas for how to do Heroes Return, because we knew we were going to do it, but we weren't sure how. And I finally said, we have a guideline for what to do. It's called Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
It's really simple. We will have something happening to the other world in which it's basically flooding to all intents and purposes. And the heroes are going to come to the realization that this world is ending, and they're going to put together an ark and get the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And after the meeting, Bob Harris came up to me and he said, I want you to write it. I understand. He said, everyone is pitching around all these ideas. I understand yours. Yours is an easy sell. Noah's Ark. I get that. Everybody gets that. So I want you to write it. And I went, okay. And we credited several other writers whose ideas I took that I absorbed into the story. But Bob asked me to take on Heroes Return because he liked my 3-word pitch for it. It's Noah's Ark. Okay, we get it now.
Yeah, we have an anchor point, right? So
yes,
people is going to get it in a second. We don't have to explain from
Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is a very common mythology. I mean, civilizations all over the world have Ark legends.
Yep, absolutely.
Which leads me to believe that something happened. Was it that one guy was told by God there's going to be a flood and he got all the animals together? Probably not. But something happened.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell it was, something happened, and it was pretty freaking major.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I used that as the basis for Hero Returns.
Have you watched the Werner Herzog new documentary on Apple TV Plus, Fireball?
No.
Watch it, because what you just said about the whatever happened is related to a big asteroid, etc. That's what.
Okay.
They even saw the place where that was supposed to happen.
Alrighty.
So it's really interesting. It's Werner Herzog. I love his documentaries. I don't know if you do,
okay.
But let me see. Citar M. Andres says, I always come by the end of these things. Oh man, I enjoyed Peter's stories in the 90s a lot. He was one of my favorite, and he still is one of my favorite writers. And the Dolmen magazines, I always started them by his column, but I digress. As you know, Dolmen published your column in Spain.
Excellent.
Says, once I paraphrased the joke he made in Captain Marvel about the comic shops were the best place to do a ritual of sacrifice of virgins. I almost got shit canned by my friends.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I did some weird stuff in Captain Marvel. Yeah,
but
I heard about that one.
That book was a lot of fun. I gotta tell you, it was nuts. What Chris Cross was doing, what you guys were doing.
Yes.
From the beginning was like, okay, this book, for me at least, when I started reading it, I thought this book is going to be nuts, over the top, and I'm just going to enjoy the ride.
Oh yeah,
that was the way I saw it. I don't know if it's the right.
I still remember, like, issue 5. I had the character say, "Okay, we're going to destroy the universe." Then issue 6 takes place after they've destroyed the universe, and they're standing there in a white vacuum, going, "Okay." Now what?
What do
The
we-
concept that we jumped over destroying the universe, I thought would have fans going, "What?" They all probably thought that by the end, after issue 5, that the next issue is going to be him, the whole battle to try and destroy the universe, and the heroes are all going to control. No, he destroyed the universe. Okay,
Yeah.
now what? And and that's where it came from. I figured, what the hell? Just you always try and do stuff that people are not going to expect.
Mhm.
I mean, villains always say we're going to destroy this, we're going to destroy that, and then they're always stopped. Well, okay, what if they weren't?
Exactly. Yukich tell you, hi Peter, just wanted to say that I absolutely love Spider-Man 2099.
Oh, thank you. So do I.
Just so you know, and so do I. We've been 2 hours and 10 minutes, so
I know.
you probably have to go back to your life and to lunch because it's one 10.
Yes, I do.
There. So we'll leave it here. One last question for me, if you're okay with it. Is there any stories that have been in your head? One story for many, many years that's been nagging you, that for whatever reason you haven't been able to tell, and you are like, I am not going to retire or leave this world, whatever comes first, without telling this story?
That's a great question. No.
No.
If I want to tell a story, I tell it. Do I have
Yeah.
stories that I've written that have not been published yet? Yes. I'd really like it if I could freaking sell them. But other than that, no. I mean, if I have a story to tell, I tell it. I kind of have to. It's the way my brain is wired.
Yes. I remember the best answer to this until yours, I love yours, because Peter Milligan, when I asked him this, he literally said, no, why waiting? I said, my favorite stories are the ones that I'm writing now.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be that if somebody said to me, what would be the ideal story that you would want to write? I would always say, I want to do the Phantom meets Tarzan, the two jungle guys. And then I wound up actually more or less doing that story because a comic publisher was going to be doing a Phantom story, wanted me to write it. And I said, can I have him meet Tarzan? And they said, okay, we'll contact Edgar Rice Burroughs and set it up. And the Edgar Rice Burroughs people wanted too much freaking money. So I wound up just doing a Tarzan-esque character. So I pretty much told the entire story that I wanted to tell in the first place, except it wasn't Tarzan, except it pretty much was. Well, so I managed to get that story out of my system.
Well, everybody knew it was Tarzan anyway,
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, what I did was I made him, oh God, I'm blanking on his name now. There was a character who was introduced in the early days of the Phantom. Oh, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name now. And he was originally going to be the Phantom's secret identity. But then along the way, Lee Falk decided, no, screw that. And he came up with the whole idea of the Ghost Who Walks.
Yeah.
And that and this character totally dropped out of Phantom continuity. He did show up briefly in the Billy Zane Phantom movie. Did you see the Phantom movie?
Yes. I try to forget it, but yes.
Oh no, I love the Billy Zane movie. He was the guy who was interested romantically in Diana, who she was not romantic.
Okay.
And he was the guy who gave him the clue about the jade skull.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. And I thought to myself, if you met Tarzan of the Apes when he was in his Lord Greystoke persona, you would have no idea this guy was a jungle lord. He's this tall, cultured English guy. Wouldn't it be interesting if this guy was essentially Lord Greystoke, except we had no idea? And and we never saw him in his actual preferred environment. So that guy became my Tarzan, and indeed it was probably a stronger story because he came straight out of Phantom continuity.
Nice. Anyway, 1:15 for you. You need to go back to your life.
Okay.
So, Please don't cut, because I want to say proper thank you to you after we cut the live feed.
Okay, sure.
But to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
And enjoy your weekend, people. Again, don't be assholes. Use your mask.
Yep.
Great weekend. And on Monday with us, surprise, surprise, you will see a video with all our guests for the month of December in an hour, 15 minutes, and you'll know there. Goodbye. Have a good weekend. And we're off in 3,